Look, Jeff,
Yep.
as the happiest two-game losing streak in NFL history comes to a close on Sunday, and you start to reflect if they are able to beat the Lions, can you remember a time where there was another Bears player who, 4 weeks ago last night, they played the Washington Commanders, and there were national pundits who were having the same kind of praise heaped on Justin Fields this week, declaring him closer to a bust than a boom. Can you think of anybody that you've been around with the Bears that has seen the narrative of his season, of his career, change that quickly?
The only thing that popped into my head is, and this is not on the same level because quarterback is such a prominent piece in any venue in any sport. Marcus Robinson. Now, Mike, you were covering the team back then. In 1999, he only played like a few games the year before, and I kept hearing, the practice squad. James Allen and Allen Robinson have played so well in practice squad. Defense can't stop him, and I'm like, okay, he's a fourth-round pick. And all of a sudden, and I just looked this up, first month of the season he had 10 catches, no touchdowns. Next 12 games he had 74 catches, 9 touchdowns. He had a 1,400-yard season with Shane Matthews and Jim Miller at quarterback, and that was the best season of his career, his second season. But you thought, oh my gosh, they got one of the great receivers right here, and he had a very strong career, no question about it. But other than that, league-wide, that 99 was the same year Kurt Warner stepped in a preseason game and took over and went to the Super Bowl and was MVP. Russell Wilson started, pretty unsuspectedly as a third-round pick and, had a great rookie year. They won 11 games. Those are the things that pop into my head. But in terms of such a dramatic pivot, much like his pivots when he's being rushed from the outside and guys coming to get him and he puts his foot in the dirt there and pivots away from trouble, which is now, I believe, one of his patented moves. And he does it well almost every time he does it. I mean, no, I haven't seen this kind of attention to it. Justin Herbert? You want to throw Justin Herbert in there?
Yeah, that's a good one. What's astounding to me is that Bigsy pointed this out yesterday, and I couldn't believe it. There are 2 teams in the entire league that are in the top 10 in both rushing offense and rushing offense, passing and running, and that is Philadelphia and Detroit. And then I had to go back and look at some of those games they had. They put up 45 points against, I think it was the Saints, and lost by a field goal. They've done very well running the ball and throwing the ball. They can't play a lick of defense. This is just a weird matchup between these 2 teams, and I don't know if we're now anticipating shootouts all the time with the Bears, but they've allowed 10 touchdowns in the last couple of weeks, and that's worrisome.
Well, against Dallas and Miami, so those are good offenses clearly. Right. So, and this is a good offense. I'm not gonna. They got a very very good offensive line in my opinion. They've got DeAndre Swift, who's apparently angry that he only had 10 touches last week. So he wants, or 10 snaps maybe it was, but he's frustrated. So he's not talking to the media this week. That always bodes for trouble if a guy's got that kind of anger built up and he's a dynamic weapon. He's a very good player, maybe their best offensive player, DeAndre Swift. They've got Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's very dangerous out of the slot. So they've got guys. I'm still scratching the head why they traded Hawkinson, because there's a big drop-off then in the tight end position, even though guys caught touchdowns last week from Goff. But the whole key here for the Bears defense, and it's their weakness right now, is generating pressure, is Jared Goff hates pressure, hates it. At Soldier Field in 2 games, he's had pressure, and he didn't play very well. So that's a guy that wants to get into a rhythm, and obviously the Bears have been hurt by rhythm quarterbacks here in recent weeks, just moving up and down the field. So you got to generate pressure and able to get off the field on third down, or you're going to be in a shootout. You very well could be.
All right, Jeff, big picture. Let's go back to the offense for a second. I understand the rhetoric in town and the value in a quarterback playing well even if your team is losing. But how about the other way? The Bears, now you look at the schedule, and there are a couple winnable games in a row. What value is there inside that building in you having a quarterback like Justin Fields win a game and play well? Not just play well in a loss, but have what happened in New England, and have happen what should happen against Detroit, and have the success despite what it would mean to your draft order or status or whatever the case.
Yeah.
Why is that important in the eyes of the Bears?
Because they got to learn how to win. You could have the best draft classes of all time. If you don't learn how to win and how to finish games, you're going to be stuck in a spin cycle that you're not going to be happy with. You know, these Detroit Lions, they play hard. They play as hard as the Bears do. They do. They run all over the field, but I haven't won a road game under Dan Campbell in 2 years. Their record is not good in that regard. That last year they played a lot of. I think they're a little ahead in the rebuild, I guess, with the exception of what they're going to do at quarterback. But last year they played a lot of close games, remember, and they couldn't finish. You got to learn how to win games. So I thought the New England victory was an important one in that regard. But they had opportunities on a handful of occasions. We can go right down the list of failed moments in late in games that whether it be a drop or a penalty or a lack of a penalty called, or an interception where they could have won or put him in a position to have a different outcome of the game. So learning how to win. So I don't care about next year. I want to win now. And I know, I just talked to Cole Kmet yesterday one-on-one. And, yeah, their mind is on the playoffs still. That's how they're thinking. That's how they're wired. And I would be disappointed if they're wired any other way.
Jeff, the Bears are averaging 1.4 sacks a game. That's 30th in the league. There are 32 teams in the league. They are also blitzing on just 16.3% of their plays. That is 29th in the league. So they're not generating a pass rush, and they're not blitzing to help them do that. I understand theoretically with this defense, the pressure is supposed to come from the front four. But if it doesn't, don't you have to change what you're doing? And as you say with Goff, don't they have to go at him with more bodies?
I would say yes. And I think that could be the case. Even on the Bears coaches show, it was a subject I brought up with Matt Eberflus. And yes, getting extras in there to break away a little bit. He did it in Indianapolis, and I'm sure that's got to be on the docket here because, you can't live that way and just, play to the ball and you're giving up, 75-yard drives repetitively, unless you think your offense can keep up. And that's still yet to be determined because as much as he's running, as much as it's a graceful, experience to watch him run and just glide by defenders like they're standing still. Until you trigger from the pocket and win from the pocket in this league, in the long run, you're still going to be a little short. And so I still think that's going to be necessary and beat defenses that way and certainly in crunch time. But, yeah, I think they do have to find a way to generate more pressure. Now you got to say, okay, what guys are the best blitzers on the team? What guys do you feel you can bring extra pressure with? And that's all got to be sorted out. We know Brisker's been able to do that. Kyler Gordon can do that as well. I think he has the potential to be a good blitzer. So we'll see if they bring that to the table because it is, as I say, it's a very good offensive line.
But if you're thrusting them into man situations more than you're comfortable or more than I think they're ready for, then I think you have run the same risk of impeding their progress or development than you do. It's the same argument on the offensive side of the ball than with these secondary pieces that you have that are young players that are going to be good players and already are. I don't know, Jeff, if you want to play too much high risk, high reward because you're not going to get a lot of rewards with this defense, and you're just going to have to take your lumps. That's why I felt bad for Alan Williams yesterday, being asked all kinds of ways about what you're going to do. He's limited in how he can answer that.
There's no question. There's no question, and you're right about that. And even if they do pick up some of the pressure, it will certainly be situational and in particular moments because they're not going to vary much. I know Mike, what did you say, 16%? I had him at 14%. They're not going to go all of a sudden, line up 9 at the line of scrimmage and sell it out. They're not going to do that. So it's going to be measured, and they're just going to have to rely on their techniques, and that's how they are positioning it the whole time. You better play your technique perfectly and win that way, and make sure you tackle.
When we think about Detroit, they are not a good defensive team, and as a result, you should be kind of spoiled for choice as to how to attack them. Could this be a game where they get more out of the pocket, where they take advantage of the poor passing numbers that the Lions have put up. But obviously, they did well against Aaron Rodgers last week.
Yeah, I'm hopeful for that for sure. And they've got some injury situations as well. Even the guy from Illinois, Kirby Joseph, who had a terrific game, was a player of the week in the NFC. He's in concussion protocol, so that was a big change for them in the safety position. They've had a bunch of different injuries. Jeff Okudah's playing well for the Lions. He was their first-round pick. He's responsible for knocking 2 guys out of the game on his own team, though, with friendly fire. So they're very aggressive, and they're not peeling back. They've made changes. They fired their secondary coach. They got a different way of looking at things right now. But Aaron Glenn is a very aggressive coach. But the results are I have them 32nd in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 categories. On defense of significance. And
how many categories do you monitor? 8 of how many?
28.
Oh, it's like 25. So it's pretty high percentage.
Well, good.
Yeah, and and they're 30th in other ones. They're just not playing well on defense, at least now of late. And again, the Bears' third down defense is rocking a 50%. They're at 51. So they're not getting it done. There's so many. They don't get 3 and outs. They don't force teams to punt much. They have the fewest punts against them in the NFL. And on third down, just listen to this crazy stat. On third down rushes, teams have 7 yards of carry and 237 yards. So that bodes well for Justin Fields, who's tearing it up on third down.
Jeff, I was
with his legs
reading between the lines and hearing Luke Getsy. Sounds like Riley Reif is pretty solid at right tackle, and he might stay there. He's healthier, and they like the way he played. Not sure if you heard the same thing. Cody Whitehair at left guard seems to solidify this offensive line. How confident do you feel in this offensive line in terms of not just run blocking, but protecting the passer? And who's going to block Aiden Hutchinson?
Well, Aiden Hutchinson, among rookies, is top dog in terms of pressures and hits and sacks and all that. But, run at him then. I mean, that's this team can do that. So run at the guys that are going to be aggressive at the rush. He had a nice interception in the end zone against Aaron Rodgers. So he's still learning his craft too. So there's ways to try and mute his effectiveness. But other than that, they don't really have much in that department either. They are tied for 30th in sacks with only 12, so they're not getting a ton of pressure. They have 2 rookies at end in Aiden Hutchinson and Josh Paschal from Kentucky, a second-round pick who hasn't played much because he had a sports hernia. But he's back, and he's starting to crank it up a little bit. He does not have a sack, though. I think the offensive line, for what it is and how they've managed to cobble things together week after week, have weathered storms, and they're not the reason the Bears are not playing well at times. They're just not. They have done a nice job. They're leaning into that running game. Granted, Justin Fields is the third piece of that puzzle and doing an unbelievable job in that regard, but I think they just believe in themselves, and I think Chris Morgan's done a terrific job. Given the youth of that line and how they cobbled it together. I think they're going to be okay.
So, Jeff, we look at last week's game, and the Bears actually, their offense outscored Miami's offense. And there weren't turnovers and there weren't big plays, but the game was ultimately decided maybe on a blocked punt, and a blocked punt for a return touchdown, and that's a really devastating thing to have happen against you. And we know that Khalil Herbert was outside, and the technique was bad as he dove at a guy and missed him, and the punt is blocked, and all the rest. We talked to Dave Wanstead earlier in the week and asked him that one of the suggestions made is that there's nothing wrong with having a running back out there, but it's got to be a guy that knows how to block. And clearly, David Montgomery, a better blocker than Khalil Herbert, maybe the reason that he is starting ahead of him because they're both pretty good players. Would there be anything wrong? We asked Dave if you put David Montgomery in there to be the blocker on a punt, and he said no, that he's done it, and it wouldn't diminish his ability. One more play, one more punt to play the running back position. Would you advocate something that drastic? Do you think that they need to take Herbert out, sort of Velus Jones style? What's your thought on that?
No, I mean, I think he's been there all season. He's done a nice job. He just made a mistake, and you got a 6'5", 266-pound Jalen Phillips with a lot of length, and he missed the cut, and it was supposed to be inside out. Instead, he missed it. So it's one occasion. I don't know. I don't have the same opinion on Herbert's so-called lack of blocking ability. I think he does better, and it's improved over the course of the last 2 years, but it's not anything that's super egregious. I think we touched on that last week as well, just in terms of pass protection. But he's a strong, low-to-the-ground defender in that regard when he's in that position of pass protecting, and he's got a good lower half of strength to grow some roots in there and do his job and get some leverage on a guy. But that's a tough out on Jalen Phillips. That length, and maybe if teams keep putting that kind of length on the outside, a guy who's actually a starter for Miami's defense, then maybe you go to a plan B. But I don't know enough about special teams or the expertise of Coach Wannstedt to make that assumption.